All right, welcome back to our learning adventure. It's good to have everyone back. Yeah. Make sure I have all the attendees recorded. Still missing a couple, but all right, let's get started. All right, so for today, the first thing I want to do is just review a couple things, just to make sure we're all ready. I'd like to review the assignment and the quiz. So let me do this. All right, because I know there was a couple, well, one specific question that most everyone missed, except for a couple people, but you all did pretty well on the quiz, and I was a little lenient too because a lot of that information I just hinted at, we didn't really cover in detail. So let's go into the quiz, or let me just do the assignment. Remember the first assignment in module 1 was just your install or set up an Oracle SQL Developer. And I think everyone, not a problem there. So thank you for that. And just to review that right quick, there's basically a couple of screenshots for the basic install of Oracle SQL Developer, and make sure you can launch the query builder, etc. And we did okay there, so thank you all. And then there was the quiz, module 1 quiz. I'm just going to go through this pretty quickly. If you have any questions, please just raise your hand or unmute and ask. So question 1, which SQL keyword specifies that an alias will be substituted for a column name in the output of a SQL query? As I said before, I just kind of hinted at it, but most of you got this right, and that's as. Question 2, you query the database with this SQL statement, select star from employees. Say why would you use this statement? And it gives you some choices: to delete data, to display the table structure, to view data, to insert data, and the correct answer was to view data. What is a null value? Remember, a null value is basically an unknown value. It's not 0, it's not blank, and it's not absolute 0. Question 4, which SQL capability is demonstrated when, and this one was kind of tricky. I apologize, I didn't really cover this, but this did require some critical thinking. So when the select clause retrieves 1 or 2 columns from a table without including a where clause, and we haven't covered any of that, but so I did give mostly, well, I didn't really give partial credit, but if you think about it, it's, if you think it in the parameters of selection and things like select or projection, so it's not joining, it's really projection only, because the where clause will filter out the results, whereas a select statement just gives you a projection of the database. Yes, that's a little tricky. I may end up going back giving you all credit for that one, because that one, I mean, the way I phrased that is a little tricky. So then question 5, what command can be used to show information about the structure of a table? That was covered some, well, hinted to. That's the describe command, or the DESC. Question 6, columns in a table, in a database table, contain data with the same type. And I did cover that, or data type. Question 7, examine the following select statements. Select star from departments. This statement will retrieve all the rows in the department true or false, and that is true. So you can even run that. If you're brave enough, just run that in the SQL developer. And you see that it will return all of the rows in the departments table. All right. What command retrieves data from the database? That's a select command. That's question 8. What language is used to query data in a relational database? That is SQL or SQL. Python, C# or Java, no. And then there was some issues with this last one. I gave everyone mostly all the credit, but if you look at the departments table and you do have, even if you, well, you can even look at it here, you notice that it's department ID, right? Department name, and it's location ID. That's the name of that one column. And that's where I deducted a few points because most everyone just said location. So essentially, to write this query, select, and then your columns, department name, or department ID, excuse me, ID, comma, department name, comma, department ID from departments. And that will return, and that's why I gave you the note. Column headers are from the departments table, and as I showed you that last, oh, excuse me, not department ID there. That is location ID. And that's where everyone kind of excuse me. Our location ID was the last column there. And that will return all of those, well, those 3 columns anyway, from your department table. Department ID, department name, location ID. Okay. All right, so that was the quiz, and so you all did mostly good. You know, I didn't really have a big problem with it, but as far as the start of class, I wouldn't worry too much on your score. I mean, once again, I didn't cover all that material, and you know, kind of unfair, but hopefully you're not discouraged. So we will just go from there on to module 2. Any questions about module 1 or expectations, or and basically we'll have a module assignment and a module quiz. And for the next few weeks, so it's, you know, pretty straightforward what the requirements are for the class. So, and yes, that quiz was a little unfair, but as I said a couple weeks ago, it just mostly to assess where you're at, and we can move from there. Okay, let me record one more person that's here, and that makes it complete. So thank you all for being here. All right. All right. So on to module 2. Yay, moving forward. And we're actually going to cover and talk a little bit more about the select statement and the where clause. All right. So our objectives objectives for 2. And we're going to start with 2-1, which is columns, rows, excuse me, and data types. And we're going to apply the concatenation operator to link columns and to other columns, arithmetic expressions or constant values to create a character expression. And I will explain what I mean there. Generally, I will walk you clearly through how these objectives apply to the lesson. Edit, execute, and save SQL statements in Oracle Developer. Now we're going to get started running queries. Use column aliases to rename columns in the query result. Enter literal values, and that's just basically values of data type, character, number, or date into a select statement. So, and then define and use the distinct to eliminate duplicate rows. And the purpose, if you're writing an article about the Olympics, you should know how many different countries and athletes were participating. Going through lists of names could be tedious. Fortunately, using SQL, the job would take less than a minute, and that's true. In addition, the output could be formatted to read like a sentence. And that's one thing about retrieving data using the select command. You can do a lot of manipulation of the data so it makes sense to our human-friendly audience. And someone is typing something in the chat. Trevor, one thing I wanted to ask, if you hear how we use joins as long as they're connected, I don't really care. We will have a section on joins, but as long as they're connected, no. And as long as you receive the correct result, that's the key, then yes, it is fine. And I do essentially pay attention to the way the queries are constructed. So hopefully that answer makes sense. So that's a question that Trevor asked in the chat. All right, so you learn the many ways SQL or SQL can be useful. It is a very useful language. So yes, we're getting very basic here. Our first section is going to cover tables. And as you know, the relational database is full of basically tables that are related. It represents a logical structure that stores data in rows, which are records. And let's see our employees database. We have all the employees with their phone numbers and IDs and hire date, etc. And basically the table is truly the fundamental block of a relational database. Remember that. Yes, you guessed it. Tables are used to store and organize data efficiently. There was a time when data was not stored in tables before the relational database model. Data would be stored in one big, large file, just a string of data with some type of separator, comma separator, semicolon, whatever. And we used to run queries on that big, huge file. And way back when someone decided to organize and create a relational database, it made things quite a bit easier. Yes, I've been around that long, so. All right, what is the structure of a table? Well, you have your columns, and just think vertically and horizontally. And columns represent the attributes of the data. Each column has a name, a data type, and a size. So remember, a column is a collection of data of the same type. We just kind of were tested on that before. So, for example, in the employees table, you have an employee ID, last name, first name, email, phone number, and others. And then you have rows. Rows actually represent records. So one row is a single record. I think of it, so on the employees, you have all the employee information. So that would essentially be a row or a record. Those are synonymous. All right. All right. So that's kind of the basic I guess, association to one of the fundamental elements of your relational database, which is a table. Now, you have the describe command or describe function, whichever one, and it's used to basically describe the structure of a table. So if you run the describe employees in your query builder, it'll give you the name of the columns, if it's null or not null. Remember, if it's null, it has to be and there has to be information in that column, and then the type, meaning the data type, and essentially the limitations of the data. So employee ID is a number, 6-digit limitation. Varchar is a variable character, just a string. Date, and those are primarily our three data types or types that we will deal with essentially in this class. So that command or that query is just describe, or DESC, which is the shortened version of describe, and then your table name, right? So we will learn how to view other table objects later in the course. So these are the rudimentary view of your table. If you want to view things like primary key and all that stuff, that will come as another lesson, all right? So table using a describe command is essential when we get to actually modifying the table, like inserting new rows and to try and determine what the data type is and if there's a null and things like that. Describe will give you that information. All right. All right, moving right ahead to the concatenation. And concatenation, it basically is a command or is a way of putting information together without running multiple queries. That's the whole idea. For example, because we have one column for first name, one column for last name, let's say we want to display everyone's first name and last name, we can create a concatenation or use the concatenation operator. The syntax or symbol for concatenation are two vertical bars or pipes they're referred to, and that's above the backward slash on your keyboard. So you want to hit two of those, and that's represents a concatenation. So values on either side of the double pipe are combined to make a single output. So here's the syntax: string one or literal or column name, pipe, that's a double pipe, and string two up to string, etc. So when values are concatenated, the result value is well, basically when strings are concatenated, you get a string. Essentially, when you use the concatenate symbol, even if you have numeric, and remember this, it's not going to add, it'll just put the two numbers together. So this is a good way, as I represented the example there with the first name and last name, to create a kind of a readable text output as opposed to running several queries. So here's an example using our departments table. Let's say we wanted the department ID and the department name. We run this query, select department ID, concatenate department name from departments, and this is what our output would look like. Of course, that format is, well, it would be a little messy. You probably would want to add a space there. So to add a space, we can add a concatenated blank string. And what I mean by that, basically this single quote with a little space, you're actually adding that to the department ID and then concatenating that with department ID and department name. So you're just adding a space. So you see how that creates a nice clean output. And you notice that your column name is always what you list after the select statement. Just please make a note of that. And there's a way to clean that up, as we will discover here in a little bit. So very simple query: select department ID, concatenate a space, concatenate department name. Any questions or concerns about concatenation? Are we all good? Thumbs up, still awake? All right, got some thumbs up. All right, cool. Just checking. All right. So as I mentioned, you probably don't want a column label that looks like that. This is where an alias can be used to clean up. So you can basically tell, what's returned in the column. So if we put an alias using the as keyword, AS, and then we're using department info. Remember, if there's a space, you have to enclose your alias in double quotes, and hence when we run this query, we get a nice little clean query with the nice little clean title of the column. Okay. So you can actually concatenate literal values. And when I say literal values, well, let's stop and check the chat. And we got some thumbs up in the chat. Thank you. Literal values are actual values that you can use as long as you place them within, or fixed data within double quotes. You can concatenate those values, or excuse me, single quotes. Pardon me. It should be single quotes. Unless it's a number, then as you know, or numbers, if you want the value of the numbers, yeah, you do not enclose them in single quotes. If you want it to be alphanumeric, then yes. So these are just 3 examples of literal values that you can concatenate with a string or output. So it is easy to create output that looks like a sentence using concatenation. That's the whole idea. So you can actually include literal values in your select statement too. Character dates must be enclosed in single set of single quotes, as I said. Every row returned from a query with literal values will have the same character string in it. So as an example, take a look at this. We're using select last name, concatenate with, and a space has a monthly salary of, and we threw in the $sign, and then we're concatenating that with salary. So it looks like a real sentence. So, and we're adding a alias. Remember that as pay is just an alias to the column, because if we didn't add the alias, it would just show last name, all of this. So we call this column pay. King has a monthly salary of 24,000 and etc. So that looks like we could even throw a period if we want to be very formal about the sentence structure. But yes, there you go. So yeah, we have everyone's salary all nicely structured in a sentence, in a sentence, so it can be easily read. And that's just using concatenation. And you don't even have to worry about, we know that pay or salary is a number. And we know that if you look at the table outside of that, yeah. All right. You can also do calculations using numbers and concatenation. Now you have to be very careful, essentially where you use a concatenation. So in this example, we want to get the annual salary. So we're using the same type of concatenation, but we're using salary times 12. So we're just multiplying the monthly salary times 12 to get the yearly salary. Does that make sense to everyone? And it won't impact any of the value, it just creates the output. And it is crazy useful later, according to what Trevor's saying. So yeah, there's a lot that you can do with that without, all you're doing is creating a useful output. So now we know how much everyone's making. They're all doing pretty well. All right. So let's move on to the distinct clause. And basically this is used to eliminate duplicate rows. You often want to know how many unique instances of something exist. For example, you want to list the number of departments, and you know if there's different departments listed, but you just want to know the number of unique departments. So you would write a query to select the department IDs. So if you do this, just to select department ID from employees, you see that you have several duplicates, and it has 12 return, but there's not 12 departments, right? We can all see that. There's even a null in there. So if you use the distinct keyword and write the same query, we know that there's 7 departments and basically one department that doesn't have an ID. So it's a non-department, or not defined department. So you see they're all unique, 50, 110, 90, 10, 20, 60, 80, 7 departments. So that's how you use distinct. One key thing to remember, I think I cover this, when you're running a distinct, the syntax should always be select distinct and then your column name. So the distinct qualifier affects all listed columns and returns every distinct combination of the columns in the select clause, excuse me. So yes, and the distinct keyword must appear directly after the select keyword. It should always be select distinct. Please remember that. That can become very confusing if you position it a little bit different. All right. So our terminology for 2.1, describe, concatenation operator, literal values, and distinct. Yay. So we're moving right along with understanding how useful SQL is. So, in returning data and formatting data in a way that it can be easily read. All right, on to 2.2, limit rows selected. So we're going to apply SQL syntax to restrict the number of rows returned, demonstrate application of the where clause. Yay. The where clause will be your friend. You'll be able to filter things out to make sense of the data returned and explain why it's essential from a business perspective to limit data. Yeah, you don't want to return all the data all the time from the table or from the join or from whatever. You do want to have a way to control that, and that's where the where clause comes in. Construct and produce output using a SQL query containing character strings and date values. All right, so why do we need to do this? Now, have you ever had information overload? Yes, we all experience that. You're streaming on your computer, your mom is asking you about school, your cell rings and the dog is barking. I don't know. That seems like a normal day to me, but that can be information overload. So wouldn't it be nice to restrict the amount of information you process? So this is essentially the job of the where clause in SQL. It is important to choose specific information. So if you become a data analyst or even a data entry person and you're running a form or whatever, basically you can control how that data is presented, et cetera, et cetera. So that is the importance of a where clause. And some of these larger databases, yes, they can contain millions of rows of data. And you don't want to waste performance or efficiencies. All right, so we know about the select statement. It's basically used to retrieve information from the database. So in order to minimally construct a select statement, you must have these two components, the select and from. So a select statement should always have select, column, or wildcard from table. The where clause is optional. And so you'll see that later, but it's not required. The where clause is only used to filter information. So we look at this quick example. So select, and I'm just providing a representation of possibilities, but select columns or wildcard, the star is a wildcard from table. You must have a table, and then the where and the conditions around the where, that's all optional. All right, let's take a look at the where clause. It's basically used to limit rows. The where clause contains conditions. So essentially, you're telling the system, this is how I'm going to limit the rows. All right, one note, an alias cannot be used in the where clause. And that can be a little bit confusing. So if you alias a column, well, I'll get to that, but just remember an alias cannot be used in a where clause. That was a little backwards. So let's look at the following SQL statement from the employees table. So basically, we're just selecting employee ID, first name, last name from employees. All right, simple, simple. By adding a where clause, the rows are limited. Let's say we wanted just employee ID 101. So here's the syntax. Select employee ID, first name, last name from employees where employee ID is equal to 101. And hence we get Nina Kokar back. And that's a way you limit data. You can also use comparison operators in a where clause. You notice that this one was essentially an equal. So equal basically states equal to, you can also have greater than or equal to, less than equal to, or not equal to, if you need to try and filter it out that way. All can be used in a where clause. So here's another example. Select employee ID, last name, department ID from employees where department ID is equal to 90. And you see it selected all of the employees with the department ID 90. Ooh. All right, character and date strings in the where clause. Yes, you can use character strings and date in the where clause. We use numbers in the examples before. Remember, characters and dates must be enclosed in single quotes. So this query is to select employee ID, last name from first name from employees where last name is equal to King. And we get Stephen King. He's the big boss. So what do you think will happen if the where clause is written as select employee ID, last name? So what do you think would happen if you write that same select clause like this? Who wants to answer that? What will happen? Will we get a result? Waiting. No responses. Well, because King is not listed in a database with the lowercase k, we get no returns. Yes. All of your data in there is case, or the strings are case sensitive. So that's why. And I just gave you that. So this is a crucial point because sometimes you're certain that you wrote the query correctly, and yet you're getting no results. It's usually because your case in your string is different than what's stored in the database. We are going to talk about in the future functions where you can eliminate that and work with case sensitive mistakes by using the upper lower and a knit cap, which is another function that looks at certain parts of the string. We'll talk about that later. But please remember SQL strings, or the strings in the database, as far as retrieving is case sensitive. Hope that makes sense. All right, comparison operators can be used in the following ways. So in this query that's looking at date, it's basically looking at everyone that was hired before January 1, 2000. So as you see, it brings back, since most everyone, since this database is pretty old, it brings back all the employees. I think there's only 20 employees in our employees database. So that comparison is a less than that date. And remember, less than date is everything that falls before that date, just so you know. And here's another example where salary, basically the monthly salary, is greater than or equal to 6,000. And we get all the employees, including Pat Fay, whose salary is 6,000 because of the greater than equal to. There's still another example. So I can select employee ID last name, first name, job ID from employees where job ID is IT, IT prog, or programmer or program. And we get all the employees that are in that department or that have that job. Excuse me, IT prog job. Alexander, Bruce, and Diana. All right, so here's a test for you all. Oh, someone's writing in the chat. Lower trim can save you sanity. That is correct, Trevor. We're all going to learn that in a little bit, well, later in the course. So here's a little test for all of you. Which roles will be selected with the following query? So which roles will be selected with this query? Bonus points if you tell me which roles will be selected. So we want select employee ID, last name, first name, and salary from employees where salary is less than or equal to 4,400. All right. Well, let me ask you this. How many employees will be returned with that query? Someone type the answer in chat or unmute if you like. Okay, Diana says 6. And Diana wins the prize. It is 6 employees. Jennifer Whalen, Trina, Curtis, Randall, Peter, and Diana. Oh. Diana, I didn't know you worked for the company. Oh, that's a different last name. Yep. All right, 6 employees. So filtering using the where clause. And I think I have the answer here somewhere too. Yep. Good job. So less than or equal to comparison operators. And yes, that includes 4,400. All right, great. Very quick lesson using the where clause. The where clause will save you all kinds of headaches. So please begin to develop an understanding about that and using comparison operators to further filter your results. Just a little scenario. Usually, as a data analyst or database administrator or just someone who manipulates data, you're given a scenario, and of course you have to figure out the records in a table, et cetera, and then use your where clause to streamline the results so that the report that you create is exactly what the requester wants, and that's the key there. All right. Okay, let's go on to 2.3, and that's comparison operators continued. Their objectives apply the proper comparison operator to return, well, obviously, we have some different ones, kind of the same. Is it more efficient, less efficient? Well, we're going to talk about that. Between, in, and like. Distinguish between 0 and null. This is important. Null, you remember, is not 0, it's undefined. So null is undefined, unavailable, unknown, inapplicable, et cetera, just it's not blank or 0. And explain the use of comparison conditions and null, because null, if you don't handle it correctly, it can drive you crazy as far as the results. All right, so why do we need to do this? We use comparison in everyday conversations without really thinking about it. I can meet you between 10 and 11. I'm looking for a pair of jeans like the ones you were wearing. If I remember correctly, the best concert seats are in rows 100, 200, and 300. And therein is kind of three very distinct and basic examples of those particular keywords and commands between like and in. These types of comparisons, yeah, they're in SQL. They're used to find data in tables that meet. If you don't know the condition exactly, you can essentially provide a way to meet or narrow the search in essence. So building a select statement to return specific data is a powerful feature of SQL. Remember that. So you're familiar with the equal, greater than, less than. SQL has other operators that add functionality for retrieving data between and in, and like. All right. Between and and. So between and is used to select and display rows based on a range of values. Now, you're probably thinking, is that like less than or equal to? Yes, it is, but the verbiage here is probably a little cleaner. And, once you establish a idea of the range, using between and will make more sense. And it's actually less typing to think about. So remember, the values specified with the between and are inclusive. So, and I'll show you what I mean here in a second. So the lower limit must be listed first. So you look at this query here, select name, first name, salary for employees, where salary between 9,000 and 11,000, which means that it includes both 9,000 and 11,000, as you see in my little example here. So remember, the values provided for the upper and lower limit are part of your included values in your return. So please remember that. So as I said before, between and are exactly the same as using less than or equal to, or greater than equal to and less than or equal to, and the and comparison operator. It's exactly the same. So is there any difference between the two expressions? No, but this is a little bit, well, depending on your point of view, this is a little bit easier to digest. It doesn't make any difference to the system, but just understand that that is the same expression, or return the same results that you see here. So according to Oracle, the between and provides code simplicity. Yeah, actually, I've used, well, no, I've used this more than I've used between and because I didn't know about this until much later in my database administration career. All right, that's between and. All right, the in condition is also known as a membership condition. So, and this is true for a lot of programming languages as well. So we use it to test whether a requested value or predicted value, or even if you want to find out if it's in a range of values. For example, in can be used to identify employees whose ID numbers are this range, 100, 101, or 102, or department's ID numbers are 40, 50, and 60. So it has to be one of those values to return a result. So take a look at this example, and the syntax, and make a note of the syntax is just in, followed by an open parentheses, a list of values, close parentheses, and the values have to be separated by a comma in this level of SQL. So with this select query, it's going to return all the employees with ID that's either 100, 101, or 102. And we know that that's going to be unique, 3 unique individuals, because the ID is unique to each of the employees. Now, it doesn't bring back anything if there was anything in between or anything like that, because we're not using the between. We're just looking at a list of values. And here's the department one, basically returning all of the department ID, department name. If it's in 40, 50, 60, notice, because we don't have a department 40, of course, it doesn't make that up like AI. It just returns the values that are in the table. Then within the where clause can also be written as a set of or conditions. So meaning that, so here's a simple query. We want to return the values from that country, locations table, where country ID is in UK or CA. We know it's Toronto, Ontario, and Oxford, UK. But we can throw in an or. So select city, state, province, country ID from locations where country ID is equal to UK or. So basically, it's the same thing that's in saying it's either this or that. So it's the same as an or condition. I guess that, without confusing you any further, as you see, it's the same results if you run that in the query builder. Hey, does that make sense? And I know I went a roundabout way to provide that comparison, but hopefully I didn't confuse you all too much. Great, lots of thumbs ups. Yay. So as with the between and and, the and provides some efficiency, and it's supposedly cleaner syntax. All right, the like, which is it's an interesting comparison or command. But let's see, let's preface this by saying, have you gone shopping? Look for something that you saw in a magazine or on television, but although I don't think, well, I don't know. I don't watch much television, but I do read. I should add, smartphone or something like that here, but you are not sure of the exact item. So like can be used in this way. A manager may know that an employee's last name starts with an S, but does not know the employee's entire name. So you can use this like condition to narrow it down so that you can eventually get that employee's name to the manager. There are two important symbols in the like that you should subject to memory: the percent and the underscore. And these are basically wildcards to structure your like so it returns essentially what you're looking for. Excuse me. So the percent symbol is used to represent any sequence of 0 or more characters. So, and then the underscore is used to represent a single character. Remember, percent is any number from 0 to, and underscore is just one, represents one single character. So if you look at this query, in this example, basically select last name from employees where last name like, so there's a single character followed by a lowercase o, and then any number of characters. And you see the ones that match that are Kokar, Lawrence, and Morgus. Because there's a single character, and it doesn't matter the case, just as long as it's a single character, and then a small o, which is represented here, and then any number of characters after it. It just so happens that those all have 5 characters after, but it doesn't matter. So does everyone see how that matches that select statement? How these 3 results match what we're looking for in this kind of searching scenario. All right, thumbs up. All right, so here we go. Which of the following names from this little list here, which will be returned using this query that I've listed here on top? 1, 2, 3, 4, or all of them? Who's going to answer? Got to answer in the chat. Diana says all. Does everyone agree with that? because it's the same query that we ran before, but we just created some new data. But one character and a small O, yeah, it looks like they all four will return, correct? Does everyone agree? And it looks like we got everyone in agreement that responded in the chat. So that is correct. So where's my response? I must took it out. It's on the bottom, you can't see it, but yes, all is correct. One additional important option with like, and please, this is important, when an exact match is needed with a string that has a percent or an underscore, an escape portion can be used to indicate that these characters are part of the string and not the wildcard value. So what I mean here, if you wanted to retrieve an employee job ID from the employees table containing the pattern underscore R, so now it's containing a pattern underscore. So we have to use an escape character, and I'll show you what I mean, because underscore is the wildcard for a single character. So it can be hair pulling and confusing. So when we're using escape character, we use the backslash. As you see here, we're setting up a way for the system to read what we're trying to accomplish. So we're using the backslash here, and we're telling the system that the backslash is your escape character, which means you're going to specifically look for an underscore and an R, because that's what's surrounded by the percent. And it can be a little confusing. It's probably best to run this, and you see the return here as far as the job ID, because this has any number of characters, the underscore and R, and any number of characters, which is the percents around the escape R. Does everyone see that? I know that can be a little confusing. Does that make sense? So not only do you have to define it, and usually the backslash is normally used because it's easy to determine between that as an escape character and everything else. So hopefully that makes sense. So as I said, this example uses the backslash as your escape character. You have to identify it and then tell the system that is just telling you that this underscore is not a wildcard. It's a character that you need to find. All right, enough of that. So if you don't use the escape, obviously you get something that you don't expect in that query. And so I'm just showing you that there. This is probably not what you're looking for. Well, it's obviously not. All right. Okay, so remember null, or don't remember null. Null can be a headache if you're not accounting for it. And especially when we get into more intermediate queries, etc. Remember that null stands for unavailable, unassigned, basically something you don't know. Testing for null is often desirable. Matter of fact, most scenarios as far as database administration, if for some reason because most systems will default a blank value to null or value that's not entered to null, just to account for that particular space, so that it's basically telling the system there's nothing, not that there's nothing here, that whatever's here is not defined. Okay, that's pretty confusing, but just remember null represents null. It doesn't really represent anything else. So for example, knowing all the dates in January that do not have an event scheduled, for all the clients in the database that do not have phone numbers or middle names or whatever, usually those are listed as null because your system will default it as null. So you can use a couple of functions to test for null. And yes, that's is null or is not null. Is null condition test for data listed as null, and is not null, obviously, is the opposite condition test for data that exists in the database. So an example, we use the where clause. The where clause is written to retrieve all the last names of employees who do not have a manager. So the syntax for that query is select last name manager ID from employees where manager ID is null. And the only return that we have is King. And this, because King is the big boss, he doesn't have a manager, he answers to God. So we should have God there. But anyway, there's no manager ID for King. King is the president CIO of the company, and he has no manager. All right, let's take a look at another example. Select last name commission percentage, because I have this commission percentage in our employees database where the commission percentage usually for the sales rep is not null. So these are the only employees that have a commission percentage. They're probably salespersons, etc. So that's how you use the is null, is not null. And these are very, very important to ensure that you know where the null values are in your table. Yeah. All right, and we'll learn more and more about nulls as we go along. And essentially, it is probably the most bothersome part of a database when you have to deal with a record that has, nulls in places where you're expecting data. All right, so our terminology for 1, 2, 3. This section between an and, in, like, and is null, is not null. All right, that ends the lesson for today. Let me review what's required for this week as far as the assignment. So please hold on. All right. Let me bring back my PowerPoint here. Oh. All right, 1 second. So in Canvas, we're on module 2. I'm still moving along. Any questions while I bring up the course? Any comments? So, and just in case you're wondering about all the symbols, that's the ADA compliance. I have to work on all those before I teach the class again in the spring. So module 2, select statement, and the where clause, pretty straightforward. Once the lecture is completed and the recorder is produced, the recording is produced, I will load that onto this page so you can reference that. There's good videos that talk about the where clause. I have one that's broken. I will make sure to change that out. I normally do check that before I show, but and this one is the column aliases. Since we have time and we're all so excited, so how does he change this? So I'm going to do this here while we're waiting, or while we're reviewing, just so I know that it's not SQL alias, column alias. All right, in the word clause, or in the for Oracle. All right. Videos. All right.
Thales is a global leader in cybersecurity, securing what matters most.
Hello guys, welcome to Amit Things. In this video, we will see what are...
All right, I'll change that. Anyway, here are your resource videos. Everything from the where clause, and I'll get you a video on column aliases, comparison operators, more in where. There's a lot in here, and null and distinct. All the things that you learn, all good videos, nice and short. So please reference those at your leisure. All right. And then there's a ton of practice queries that you can copy and paste into the developer to gain more, just get more intuition, more knowledge on how these will run, and they are all connected to our schema. So I would definitely recommend practicing with these. And it's just a text file. You can copy them from the preview here or download the text. And it's probably always good to do that. And then you have your practices, both, and the practice, which will help you with the assignment and the quiz. That's one of the reasons why I created these, or I use these. And the good thing, you have the solutions right with them, so you can practice and then check your answers. That's what that's for. So there's one for each of the sections, 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3. So please go through those, because it gives you essentially the vocabulary and then the try it, solve it. And as you've probably already noticed, getting these try it, solve it's and understanding what the solution is, it will definitely help you to get through the queries. So please, the vocabulary is not necessarily very important, but the try it, solve it will truly help you get through the assignment and the queries. And they're pretty straightforward, and they follow the material covered in the lecture. All right. And as I said, you have the practice itself and the practice document itself, and then the solutions right with it. And then the assignment is very similar to the practice. And these are all due on Sunday. So the assignment is just, essentially goes through the section, each of the sections. And then you have these challenge questions. You have 10 of them. So I would recommend, and some of you are doing this already, which makes it easier for me to grade. I would recommend downloading this document and then just adding your answers to the document, including your screenshot of what query you're running in the developer. That's key. That's how you get full credit. So once again, and you don't have to do this, but I do recommend, reading through the kind of the objectives again on the assignment, downloading the document, adding a screenshot of the developer. Hence, you open the developer, run your query, right? And then take a screenshot. And on a Mac, it's easy to take a screenshot. You can screenshot the whole, your whole screen. On the Windows, you can use the snippet tool. So yes, I expect for you to create a screenshot of your query and the results. So please do that and just copy and paste it right into the document. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. That's generally what I'm looking for, because this is a docx for your submission. And even if you don't use that document, make sure you number your results. Like there's 10 here, 1 through 10. And so anyway, but I know it's not your job to make it easier for me, but it's easier to grade if I can see the question and the response. All right, so that's the assignment. And I think I only have one, yeah. And it does, even though it says 2.1, it actually goes through, let me make sure here. SQL statement, titles, years. Yeah, basically it covers all, yeah. And you can utilize all that you learned in this module 2. for the assignment. All right, any questions about the assignment? And I do prompt you here. Execute the queries in SQL Developer, include the SQL statement and output for each question, and submit to Canvas. Please, please, please do that. All right, and then last but not least, you have the SQL quiz, or the module 2 quiz, excuse me, on all 3 sections: column, characters, and rows, limit rows selected, and comparison operators. 18 points. So I'll preview it here. There's 11 questions, and that's also due Sunday. Okay. And then that's it. Then it's on to module 3. All right. Let me stop sharing here if I can. All right, there we go. Hello, everyone. So that's module 2. Let's see, I have to make sure that one video is updated, but any concerns or questions about module 2?
Nope.
Nope. We're all good. Okay. There we go. That ends our lesson for this evening. Please remember that you can send me a Canvas message. I do try to check those often if you're having any issues. Otherwise, that's all we have for this evening. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. I hope you all have a good evening. I will see you all next Monday, September 15th. Adios.